Good evening from Dunblane, a city much of the country knew little about 3 days ago. A city that after the dreadful events of Wednesday will now be remembered for a generation. In this special programme we'll be looking back and after the amazing scenes at tonight's vigil in Dunblane's Cathedral, trying to look forward. The building I'm in has been at the centre of Dunblane's struggle to console itself after what happened on Wednesday. This is the Scottish Church's house, the joint headquarters of all Scotland's churches. From here, in the shadow of the cathedral, the vicars, priests and ministers have planned their counselling for the bereaved. In the cathedral itself tonight, the people of Dunblane came together to grieve and to remember 16 young lives snuffed out in 3 minutes of madness, and to pray for the recovery of those still in hospital. In tonight's programme, we'll be trying to capture the mood of the people here and in the country as a whole. Joining me in Dunblane, some of those involved in the harrowing work of counselling. At a primary school in southwest London, ITN's Home Affairs editor Jennifer Nadel will talk to teachers and parents who, like millions of others, have felt the shockwaves from Wednesday's shooting. But first, Norman Rees looks back at the 3 days that have changed this city forever.
In primary school, the reality was worse, much worse. 10 minutes of unspeakable horror had changed the face of Dunblane forever. Children had stared the gunman in the face and will never forget.
He was really horrible. It's that kind of man like you have nightmares about, you know, wearing black clothing and guns.
Hiya, how are you?
There was immense relief for many, moments to hug a child as if you never wanted to lose sight of them again. But even relief carries a burden in Dunblane.
And then I found out that it wasn't my daughter's class, and I felt relieved, and then I felt terribly guilty that I felt relieved.
We're one of the lucky ones. We've got her with us yet. These poor mums that their babies have died, and they're just wee babies.
The massacre stretched the emergency services to the full.
The children were very quiet, but of course they had all been injured, and so they were in shock both because of the injuries and presumably also emotional shock. We as professionals are trained to deal with injuries in children and adults, so we got on with it. We went on to autopilot and did our job.
Who can ever forget now the classroom picture of Primary 1? Or forget too the bullet holes in the windows of the school gymnasium where so many lost their lives.
The scene that met us in the hall in the gym was just utterly appalling and one's worst nightmare. I can't get the images out of my head yet, and I think that will take some time. It was an appalling mess. Evil visited us yesterday, and we don't know why. We don't understand it, and I guess we never will.
This is a quiet town, a place where people felt safe.
Well, it's been horrendous. We are a sleepy little town, very united community, and just in a total state of shock and disbelief and mourning as a result of this.
Over the past few days, many businesses in Dunblane have closed as a mark of respect. One of the few exceptions, the florists, busy preparing flowers that local people have been carrying to place at the gates of the school.
The school had a lovely atmosphere and lovely teachers, and that's why we wanted to come and live here. 3 of my children have been through this school. I mean, all my memories of my kids are through that school. You know, the carol concerts and everything. So it's just can't believe it happened in that place.
They've all been coming back to the school, clutching their flowers. The pavement here covered in tributes. Among them, 17 single red roses. Each has the message, "May you play forever."
Well, 2 leading politicians, Michael Forsyth and George Robertson, normally fierce opponents at Westminster, both have close ties with Dunblane. This week they symbolise the nation's unity in grief. I spoke to them earlier this evening outside the cathedral. It's been said in Dunblane today that it seems as if you and Tony Blair and John Major didn't come here as politicians, but as concerned parents. Is that how you saw it?
I certainly saw it that way. My children went to that school, but I think it is a sort of strange, almost horrible irony that this accident of evil took place in this small town where I live and where Michael Forsyth, my opposite number, represents, and that we were thrown together here. But what happened today, I think, was unique in British politics, where the leaders of the Scottish and the national parties came together with a message of hope and of mourning for people here, just to in some way let them know what the nation thought, and to help them in a time of deep and grievous trouble.
Michael Forsyth, politics seem almost irrelevant in the face of something like this.
Well, you saw the House of Commons on Thursday. I've never seen the House of Commons like that. And I think it spoke for the whole nation. The nation is united in grief. The mourning and the grief is, of course, that of the parents, but the whole country feels for them. And anyone with young children can only imagine how terrible it must be for those parents. And what we've seen in Dunblane and across the country reflects that.
I had 3 children who went to that school, and it was very, very difficult to actually walk into the school and remember the happy days in Dunblane Primary School, the school concerts, the carol services, the parents' nights, and not to feel, you know, the sort of horrible feeling that was shared, but to go in there and to be part of the healing process, to be able to go in, the Prime Minister, leader of the opposition, and my political opponent, and to offer some hope and some support and some sympathy to the people who have been the most deeply traumatized, was an opportunity that I think we had to take. Politicians in these situations can't do very much. We can offer a little bit of leadership, and I hope we did that today.
Shadow Secretary, Secretary of State, thank you both very much indeed. Well, joining me now here in Church's House in Dunblane are the Reverend Maxwell Craig, General Secretary of the Ecumenical Movement in Scotland, one of the clergymen heading the counselling teams. He's just come from tonight's vigil. Dr. Sheila Gray, one of the bereavement counsellors, and Mike Robbins, Chair of Dunblane Primary Schools Board. Reverend Craig, if I could start with you first. All of us outsiders, as it were, who witnessed the extraordinary scenes at that vigil of thousands of people queuing in the cold in dignity and silence, couldn't fail to be moved. It must have been a very emotional time for you.
It was a very emotional occasion, and yet it was an occasion when I think the strength, the potential strength, and the present strength of this community was demonstrated, that really in the cathedral, many people from further from, I was going to say from Firth of Dunblane, but you might not understand that. However, I think they felt supported by the strength of those 3 hours.
Dr. Gray, after the numbness, is the vigil a symbol, as it were, that the healing process is beginning for real?
Oh, I think that's being a little optimistic. I think the numbness will last for a considerable time. All bereaved people develop and recover at a different rate, and I wouldn't like to say generally at all. I don't think so. I think this was just the beginning for us all of looking forward.
Well, you've been talking to some of the bereaved, some of the families. Where do you start? How do you begin talking to people whose lives have been so shattered?
Well, in the first place, of course, you don't talk to them. You encourage them to talk to you, because that is all we can do. We can only be with them at this stage. We're doing nothing fancy in the way of counselling at all. We're just simply encouraging them to talk. And that's the most important thing anybody can do for them.
And I think the nation as a whole would like to know, without intruding, how are they?
Numb, grieving, bewildered. What more can one say? That's about it, I think, at the moment.
Mike Robbins, you were at the vigil. Did it show in all its entirety the strong sense of community that Dunblane has?
I think so. I think to be honest, the process probably started last night. There was a service in the Catholic Church across the road from here, which was attended by probably 250 people or so. It's a small church, and the church was actually full, bursting at the seams really. And obviously a lot of people who weren't Catholics attended that service. And similarly tonight, there were people from all backgrounds, from as far as we could tell, from all over Scotland who were here. Visitors even from as far away as parts of England were here too. And I think that in itself is an indication of the support which exists within the country as a whole, and certainly within Dunblane in particular.
We're trying very much as well tonight to look for some glimmer of hope. How do you go forward from here in Dunblane?
Well, I think Sheila's right. It's a long and tortuous process, but I feel we've taken the first small tentative step in that direction. We did a couple of meetings now of the school board and the Parent Teachers Association, and those are the bodies who reflect, hopefully, parents' opinions and desires in the area. During the course of those meetings, we were able to put together what we termed a plan of action. We were able to come up with a few concrete steps, how we saw and hopefully how parents saw us taking the whole process a step or two forward. Some very positive and practical applications were put forward at those meetings.
Reverend Craig, we've been talking to the politicians who've said that all their differences for the time being have been forgotten. That of course goes for the churches as well. Can any real lasting good come out of that?
I think it really is, this is far too heavy a price to pay for any good that may come. We must say that. This is I mean, Sheila is right, this is a numbing. The whole community is still in shock. I could say, and this might sound a little rude, but I could say that until we're not blaming you, we want the encouragement of the world. We've had messages from all over the world, here in this house, from Australia, New Zealand, everywhere. But nevertheless, we require, in the end, the solution to grow here, and therefore the media have done a great job in supporting, and we will thank you and we will say goodbye, because the healing must grow in this community. And in a funny way, it's difficult while there is so much attention on this really close-knit, I believe, very strong community, but nevertheless, we are still in shock.
Well, Sheila Gray, has there been anything positive coming out of the visits of the politicians and, of course, the royals to come?
I believe so. Not everybody would agree with me, but I believe so. The fact has been driven home to us that this is a major event. I think to begin with we thought, oh, we've had a terrible time, but it's just a terrible time. But we've suddenly realised, because of the media interest, because of the politicians' interest, and because the Queen is coming, that this is a major event. This is something that has never happened before, and pray God will never happen again.
Dr. Gray, Reverend Craig, Mike Robbins, thank you all very much indeed.
Okay.
So how has the country as a whole shared in Dunblane's grief? On Wednesday evening, there can have been few parents who didn't hug their children a little tighter when they picked them up from school. As Andrew Simmons explains, the shootings left a shadow over the lives of people hundreds of miles from here.
Dear Dunblane School, I look up in your braveness through this tragic time.
It's hard to live without your loved ones.
Everybody was sad today. We thought about it in assembly and in the class.
Teachers read out letters written by children at a London school. Youngsters in Worcester write condolence cards. The trauma of Dunblane has moved the whole nation, and not just in the schools. Helplines across the country have had an upsurge in calls, this one in Liverpool inundated by parents with the pain of their own losses brought back.
There's been a resurgence of feelings, the emotions that they perhaps felt have come to the surface.
Security has of course been uppermost in people's minds. Children use passes to get back through self-locking doors at a school in Cleveland. At this primary near Dereham in Norfolk, the headmaster has issued personal attack alarms to his staff.
Good afternoon, can I help you?
And in Primrose Hill, central London, they rely on an entry phone system. But as parents realise, it's virtually impossible to fully safeguard schools.
I don't know what you learn from a thing like this. You pray that it's only a one-off. You know that it isn't.
I feel very secure in this school, as secure as I can be. But I think there always will be a chance of somebody coming in.
And there had been a fear felt by children all over Britain this week Most schools chose to talk it through with their pupils.
I also cried in assembly. You know, I openly cried and said that's how I was feeling, and said to the children that I felt that today we needed to support a community that far away from us.
Throughout the country, people from all generations are trying in their own ways to support the bereaved at Dunblane, if not practically, at least in thought and prayer.
Andrew Simmons there on the trauma of Dunblane. Well, now to discuss the impact of the tragedy on the children, we go to a school in southwest London and ITN's Home Affairs editor, Jennifer Nadel.
Dermot, I'm here at Albemarle School, which is a typical inner-city primary school in southwest London. It has 235 pupils ranging in age from 3 to 11, and I'm joined by its head teacher, Hugh Baldry, Sarah Malcolm, who's a governor at the school and also has a 5-year-old here, Jan Brooks, who also has a child at the school and helps out in the classroom, and Dr. Tony Kaplan, who's a child psychiatrist at the London Traumatic Stress Disorder Clinic. If I can start with you, Hugh, children across the country will obviously have heard of the terrible events at Dunblane. What have you said to pupils here?
We had a special assembly this morning, which I think was probably one of the most moving things that's happened in my teaching career. We decided to talk to the children about what had happened, but in a lighter way as possible, to talk about how there were vicious and horrible people in the world, and how I wanted the children to empathise with the children in Dunblane. We had a lovely assembly, we had prayers in it, and at the end of it we tried to emphasise our own security and how they need to protect themselves from anything like this happening to them.
As a mother, Sarah, how important do you think it is that children do come together and talk about a tragedy like this at school?
I think it's very important that children don't bottle up how they're feeling, whether they're frightened or whatever their feelings about things like this sort of thing happening are. But on the other hand, I think it's a very fine balance to keep the innocence of childhood as long as possible at the same time.
Jan, what did you tell your 5-year-old about the events?
Well, he actually saw the bulletins and he made no comment, and I didn't make a big thing of it. I mean, it has happened, he's seen it, and he's asked no questions, and I will not say anything until he asks me that questions.
And how safe do you think he feels now?
I think he feels very safe, because he feels safe coming into the school, he feels safe with his teacher, and I'm not going to say to him anything to make him frightened of leaving me in the morning. He's safe here, and I'm happy with this.
Tony, what advice would you give to parents and teachers about how to deal with children who are watching very distressing stories and listening to them from Dunblane?
I think it is important to give children the opportunity to talk, to express their feelings and their thoughts. The younger children may do this in play or through drawing. I think it's important that they get the message from the parents and from the teachers that they can talk about these things without fear of upsetting the adults. Some children will feel fear, feel sadness, and that's okay. If they want to come to the parents to be close, that's also okay. I mean, parents should show their love directly to their children. That helps to create certainty for the children, stability for them, to help them cope with the uncertainties of the world.
Looking to the future for a moment, Hugh, what changes, if any, are you going to make to security here at your school?
Well, there's a recent case in Middlesbrough where a child got stabbed in the classroom, and the governor's reacted very positively to that, and we had security fencing put up around the school. We had security locks put on the doors, and we got security cameras, which made the school community feel much safer. But there is concern amongst the parents now and the governors, and we're actually looking to the final bit of the jigsaw, which is a security lock on the gate. We don't want the school to be a prison camp. We don't want the children to feel trapped inside the school and the parents to feel trapped outside. But we have got to make everybody feel as safe as we possibly can, and I think we've achieved that balance.
Sarah, what about you and Jan as parents? What would you like to see the government and schools doing to ensure that your children are safe?
I think the school has to be an environment where the children are safe to come in, but also happy to be there without feeling that they're locked in and they can't get out, and that parents can't get in. They've got to be happy where they're working and where they're learning and playing.
Yes, I mean, the security in this particular school, I think, is adequate. I think if somebody wants to come into a building and they've got guns, they will get into the building, no matter what we do. And what we have here is a good system, and it works, and our children feel safe.
Tony, if we are going to see increased security at schools across the country, how do we strike the balance? How do we make sure that children are safe without making them too fearful?
I think that's a very important point. I think we have to keep in mind that the events in Dunblane are extraordinary. I think it would be harmful to children overall in the long term to give them the impression that these are events which are likely to happen by creating enormous security in schools which are a normal part of their environment.
You've obviously taken quite extensive steps here, but at the end of the day, can you guarantee your children's safety?
No, if somebody wants to come in and has got guns and wants to do this kind of thing, they'll do it. They might do it here, they may do it in the shopping centre down the road, they may do it in the church. If somebody has that urge to do it, they will find a way, whatever our security is.
Okay, well thank you all very much for joining me here at Albemarle School in South West London, and now it's back to you, Dermot, in Dunblane.
Thanks, Jennifer. Well, the Queen will be coming here on Sunday, Mother's Day, with the Princess Royal. The head of the church in Scotland will be here too. He's the Right Reverend James Harkness, the moderator of the church's General Assembly, and he joins us tonight from Edinburgh. Reverend Harkness, how helpful is it, the outpouring of support, not just from the rest of the country, but from the world as a whole?
Well, I think it's very significant that this level of support is given, and I'm quite sure that the people in Dunblane and in the community at large in Scotland are very appreciative of all the help, all the thought, and indeed all the prayers that are surrounding those who are in this desperate situation in Dunblane at this time.
And how can people help?
Well, I think that one of the principal ways of helping, and that's been indicated earlier in the programme, is just being with them, but of course without being intrusive. And of course the community itself, as a cohesive group, will provide a great deal of support from within itself. And within that, of course, I include the churches, which are already part of the community, and those ministers and clergymen who are there, who know the people and are known by the people, so that it is a very real relationship there upon which they will build.
Now, what about those moving scenes at tonight's vigil at Dunblane Cathedral? Is there any cause for hope there?
I think there is cause for hope, but one of the things I would suggest is that the agenda and the pace of the agenda in this grieving process must be dictated by the people in Dunblane, and not perhaps by those of us who live out with that city. I believe that's tremendously important. There's a great temptation to be asking questions which will certainly arise, but which at this moment are probably not the right questions to be raising insensitivity to the people who are there.
So, briefly, how does Dunblane move on from here?
Well, Dunblane moves on, and the grieving process will take its own pace. I think for the rest of us, it is to assure them that even if we are not physically in their presence, we are walking with them, we are thinking about them, we are praying for them, and we are praying with them.
Moderator, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So there we leave Dunblane for tonight. For the people here, the desire now, as we've heard, is to allow the bereaved a period of private mourning. For the rest of us around the country, the Dunblane tragedy will remain in our memories for a long time to come. Above all, it'll be those school photographs which will stand out as the abiding images. From Dunblane, good night.